Okay, in progress now.
All right, let's start all over.
Okay, so the title of my presentation this afternoon, I'm going to say it in about 40 minutes, and then we'll have a conversation. Is this an hour and 30 minutes, right? So I'll use 40 minutes of that time to make a presentation. BBM and his father's martial law. You are so familiar with what happened in the past, so I'm not going to dwell more in that aspect, but more about what's happening now and how BBM, or Bongbong Marcos, and the other name, of course, is Babangon Muli, rise up again. The Philippines will rise again. So I will be focusing on what is happening now and how is Bongbong Marcos responding to the legacy of the martial law. As we all know, this celebration or commemoration, maybe commemoration because we are not celebrating, is commemoration of September 21, 2022 declaration of martial law has an added significance, especially with the election of his son, Ferdinand Marcos Jr., or BBM, by an overwhelming or landslide victory. Imagine 31 million with 90 versus 14 million. That's a significant landslide victory in the history of Philippine politics, presidential politics. For those who suffered the dark days of martial law years, and for those who have known its atrocities, this news is greeted with much chagrin. For heaven's sake, what the hell is going on? Have we forgotten the Marcos dictatorship that imprisoned, tortured, and killed thousands and sent the Philippine economy into a tailspin, which oversaw the rise of crony capitalism? So the question is, how shall we commemorate the 50th anniversary of the declaration of martial law? So I raise some questions. How shall we take account of our painful past in relation to our struggles and hopes in such a time as ours? How shall we take account of the sins of the past in relation to our aspirations for a just and abundant life in the present? Our ability to answer these questions will significantly shape how we respond to the challenges of our contemporary context. Our interest, or my interest in the past, is not simply for its own sake, but for the sake of charting a new and better tomorrow for all. This is based on the understanding that those who have gone before us and those who are yet to come have a future. But the future of the past, and the hopes of those who will come after us is wedded to what we do in the present. We have heard people say, don't make BBM responsible for the sins of the father, which he does not even accept. It is unfair. He is not responsible for this past. My answer is that while not all of us are directly responsible for what happened in the past, we are responsible for what we do with the past and what can be done with the past. We are not directly responsible for what happened in the past, as many of us, but we are responsible for what we do with this past and what can be done with this past. BBM cannot escape this past. He is what he is now because of this past. BBM knows that he must deal with this past. In fact, his actions in the first few days as President of the Republic of the Philippines reveal an active engagement with this past. This past is so important for him. The question is, how is BBM relating to his father's legacy? What is he doing in relation to this past? That's the question for us. After the 1986 EDSA revolution, many of us have thought that the Marcoses were done. We have been proven wrong. Even as early as 1992, there were already writings on the wall of the return of the Marcoses to power. That's only 6 years after EDSA People's Power Revolution, 1992. Randy David pointed out that if the votes received by Marcos crony Danding Cojuangco and Imelda were put together, they had more than Coris Aquino's anointed and eventual winner, Fidel V. Ramos. Ramos won by a slim margin against Miriam Defensor Santiago. So, ask Randy David, so paano nangyari ito? Nasaan ang euphoria ng EDSA? 6 na taon pa lang ang nakaraan. So, yun pa lamang should have already given us an inkling of what was coming. Just 6 years after EDSA revolution, where is the euphoria? Gone with the wind. It disappeared like a morning dew with the rising of the sun. The Marcoses have staged a comeback. It's a bit of political strategy. BBM won by a landslide over his nemesis, Vice President Leni Robredo. Now we have BBM. What can we expect from him? How will he relate to his father's legacy? Although still a few days in office, we can project BBM's posture and moves. Some signs are already visible. For obvious reasons, he cares about the legacy of his father and the family name. Unless one is estranged from one's family, would not a beloved son care about the parent's legacy? I believe he does. And he was already doing it even before his presidency. How much more that he is the president of the Philippines? He is on a mission. This is the mission: to clean the tarnished image of his family and restore the former glory. If it was glorious at all, BBM does not only stand for Bongbong Marcos, but for his campaign slogan, Babangon Muli, rise again, which alludes to the claim that the martial law years were the golden years in the Philippines. The ghost of Marcos Sr. will always be BBM's conversation partner. As a good son, he would be seeking approval from his father, writes the well-known Filipino historian Ambeth Ocampo. BBM said this in his first meeting as president. Sabi niya, parang pinapanood ko ang aking ama. Parang pinanood ko ang aking ama. In BBM, we have as if Marcos Sr. rose from the dead. He is a surrogate to his father, says historian Alfred McCoy, the University of Wisconsin at Madison. If we can be more generous, it is surely this, but it is also more. He would also seek to present himself as someone who can unite the Philippine society and fulfill the betrayed hopes of the Filipino people. without explicitly acknowledging the mistakes and abuses committed under martial rule of his father, in fact, denying them, he declared that he would govern differently and ask the people to judge him by his own actions and not the deeds of his father. Give me a chance. Without much delay, one of the obvious first acts of BBM administration is the restoration of Marcos' political dynasty, a dynasty that stands in opposition to its arch rival, the Yellow Dynasty of the Aquino administration. Since 1992, the Marcos family had made no secret of its plans to reclaim political power and to reclaim the Marcos legacy. BBM was elected as a congressman in 1992 in the 2nd District of Ilocos Norte from 1992 to 1995, Ilocos Norte governor from 1998 to 2007, and congressman from 2007 to 2010, and as senator from 2010 to 2016. He ran as vice president in 2016, but failed, and then ran again as president in 2022, in which he finally, at last, succeeded. Now the Marcos dynasty is back in power. Other Marcoses are also in power. Amy Marcos, sister of BBM, is a senator and is the chair of 4 Senate committees: electoral reforms and people's participation, cooperatives, foreign relations, and justice. Matthew Marcos Manotoc, you remember Manotoc, Tommy Manotoc, right? Son of Tommy Manotoc and Amy Marcos, is the governor of Ilocos Norte. Ferdinand Alexander or Sandro Marcos, BBM's eldest son, is a representative from Ilocos Norte. Not surprisingly, in the Philippines, wanting to gain favors from the newly elected president, the House of the Representatives of the 19th Congress elected the young Sandro Marcos as the senior deputy majority leader. You may be junior in the lower chamber, but it surely does not require seniority to become the senior deputy. And on July 25, 2022, the House of Representatives elected Martin Romualdez, President Marcos' first cousin and Representative Sandro Marcos' uncle, as Speaker of the House. Martin Romualdez from Leyte. Another Marcos relative that was given a plum post in the 19th Congress is Yeda Romualdez, representing a party list Tingog or Voice. Wife of Speaker Romualdez is the head of the Committee on Accounts. The Committee on Accounts deals with internal budget of the House of Representatives. As an extension to this political dynasty, BBM has rewarded his political allies with critical government positions. The spoils of various kinds, especially government positions, have been given to his funders and close associates. To cite a few, I have a list, but just a couple. Antonio Ernesto Anton Florendo Lagdam Mayo Jr., who donated 247.2 million in kind from the party, is appointed a special assistant to the president. Remember, this Florendo was also the one who supported Rodrigo Duterte, who ran for office and won in 2016. Remember the person who owns a plantation and an island there in Mindanao, Florendo Group. Then also Melquiades Robles donated 30 million in cash, is appointed chief of the Philippine Charity Sweepstakes Office. So that's to give you a very brief background. Then another move of Bongbong Marcos, as you can expect, thwart all efforts to recover Marcos' ill-gotten wealth. As a background, since 1986, the Presidential Commission on Good Government, or PSGM, was able to retrieve about $5 billion from the Marcos family, with another of about 2.4 billion still under litigation. Part of the recovered amount has been used to compensate thousands of victims of the brutal martial law years. As you know, a court in Hawaii found Marcos Sr. guilty of human rights violations and awarded $2 billion from his estate to compensate for more than 9,000 Filipinos who were part of a lawsuit against him. BBM, along with his mother Imelda, has long tried to thwart all efforts to recover billions of ill-gotten wealth by Ferdinand Marcos Sr. Since then, he has denied ill-gotten wealth of Marcos Sr. Now he is in a position of power. What can you expect? He can effectively thwart efforts to recover this wealth, and he has already done so. Just recently, a lawmaker, Congressman Bienvenido Abante, submitted a bill to scrap the Presidential Commission on Good Government, arguing that it has outlived its usefulness and that it is an anti-Marcos agency. So there's already an effort. The first attempt to abolish the commission was not successful. It was vetoed by the previous president. This latest effort is unlikely to face resistance, with BBM commanding a legislative super majority. Besides the issue of ill-gotten wealth, there is an issue of the state tax that he must address. So the front runner in the Philippine race, Ferdinand Marcos, has not paid a single centavo of the 203 billion pesos or 3.9 billion worth of taxes due on the estate of his late father, more than 30 years on from the dictator's death. Another Marcos move, Bongbong Marcos, to portray an image as a seeker of unity and inclusivity. He is claiming that he is the president for all Filipinos. In contrast to the foul-mouthed populist Duterte, who portrayed himself as going after his opponents, which he did, made statements to put the elites in their place, of course, not his allies and supporters, and openly lambasted the leaders of the church, especially the Roman Catholic, and vowed to kill those who stood in the way of his drug war. BBM, as you can observe, even on television, ran for the presidency trying to project an image as a unifying figure who would restore the Philippines to its former glory or to its golden years. This he said without acknowledging, of course, the mistakes and abuses of his father. He has not made statements frontally attacking institutions and individuals. His tone has been more conciliatory. He has portrayed himself as one who is grateful for giving him and his family the second chance and to prove himself worthy, and is eager to be accepted in the family of nations. And another one is restoring confidence in the Philippine economy. Instead of focusing on drug wars or the war on drugs, right? Observe the news and read about what he's doing, which his predecessor did. BBM has focused on the economy. This must be viewed in relation to the ailing and struggling Philippine economy, which suffered much in the last years of the Marcos Sr. presidency. Part of the Marcos legacy is the public loss of confidence in his abilities in 1983 and 1984. The Philippine economy shrunk by about 10% during these 2 years, and international banks refused to lend more money for the country's imports. During this time, the peso lost drastically its value. This is a Marcos legacy. With this ghost in BBM's head, it is not a surprise that one of the first moves of BBM is to elect his economic team, what called the A team. The announcement of their names was greeted with much appreciation. It calmed the market. His choice received such remarks as the best, the winner. Economists gave it big thumbs up. A couple of high-profile appointments include Bangko Sentral ng Filipinas Governor Benjamin Diokno and as Secretary of the Department of Finance and former President of the University of the Philippines, Alfred Pascual, as Secretary of the Department of Trade and Industry. Another move, unlike Duterte, unlike his father, Marcos Sr., BBM is expected to seek cordial relations with the West. He is at home with the West, even as he will seek to be cordial with the People's Republic of China. Even if BBM did not earn a formal degree, he got most of his education in the West. And this is also true of his wife and close family members. It is BBM's top concern to clear the negative image of the Marcos family abroad. He will be engaged, to use the words of political analyst Professor Richard Heiderian, he will be engaged in charm offensive. He will be very charming. He will not use those words that offend people. He will be engaged in charm offensive. His game plan is to show a new face, the good and benign face, to the world. The last one, very central, in fact, providing this, what I would say as the frame of his presidency, the overarching project that frames his presidency is to revise the history of the Marcos era. That is the frame. The Marcos family started this project before his assumption as president, and BBM will have this frame in relation to his father's legacy. If the immediate post-1986 political order was self-consciously framed as national revitalization from the dark years of martial law, since the return of the Marcoses in the Philippines, their project has been to recast the dark years as the golden years. They have used their power and wealth to rewrite the history of martial law and their family's story to one of being the victims and the persecuted, and that the martial law days was a time of relative peace and prosperity. With the passage of time, the failure of the post-Marcos political establishment, and a smart use of social media, the Filipino people have become receptive to the creation of a historical fiction. The social media has played a significant role in the making of a historical fiction, but it has been pointed out by some political analysts that this is not the sole factor. The social media has been effective because the soil has been prepared. We have a population who has felt being left out and alienated from the yellow ascendancy and has developed what political analysts has named as rage against liberal elitism and dysfunctional democracy. There has been a growing disaffection with democratic liberalism. That's why you can see the rise of populist authoritarianism. The social media has been used effectively by the Marcosists to tap this disaffection and frustration, and has actively pursued the project of rewriting and revising the Marcos legacy. Just try to Google. And then once you Google, algorithms will lead you to many of these, especially lots of TikTok. Just try. And then every time you open your computer and search, you will that kind of information will be given to you. Lots of TikToks to really refute what happened martial law days, and then another version of the Marcos history. Just try it. Algorithm will find you, will feed you all the kinds of information about Marcos and the work of writing history, more than what you need. So it has been used by Marcos. The social media has been effectively used by the Marcosists to tap this disaffection and frustration, and has actively pursued the project of rewriting and revising the Marcos legacy. So victory is a culmination of a decades-long attempt to rebrand the Marcos family's name and image, recently through a supercharged social media. Okay, and this has been the long plan of Marcos. And if you can look at Twitter, Twitter suspended around 300 accounts from the supporter base of BBM during the campaign period. And then more ways in which the Marcosists have really used the social media to present a different image. So the question for us is, how shall we move forward? How shall we move forward? For me, to move forward is not to forgive and forget, or primarily to forget. Even forgiveness is not really about forgetfulness. For one to forgive, one must remember. How can you forgive if you cannot remember? So forgiveness is not about forgetfulness. It is about remembering, and then so that you can move to healing. If we are to move forward, we must remember, especially the dismembered. Remember, another way of writing is meaning those who are dismembered has to be remembered or put together. What is this act of remembering? I must say that our project of remembering is critically important in the context of organized and selective forgetting. First, there are those who are invested in having us forget or bury the past, especially the memories of the victims, because to exhume the painful past is threatening. So they do whatever they can to make the people forget the dangerous memories of the past. Second, there are also those who claim that they are for remembering, but they are more invested in selective remembering for the purpose of rewriting history. Third, there are those who remember history and end up repeating the cycle of oppression and victimization. They say, now is our turn. As we say it in Filipino, sa kanila noon, sa amin naman ngayon. For me, remembering has a different motivation and direction. It is not simply an act of recalling what happened in the past, but the retrieval of the past, especially the muted voices of the marginalized and those who died before their time, in light of our dreams and hope for a better tomorrow. The painful and dark past is exhumed not simply for its own sake, but for the sake of healing and transformation. This is not simply remembering as recalling, it is remembering the dismembered or the broken. Moving forward requires that we do not forget, but remember the dismembered. This is the kind of remembering that gives future to the past. Thank you.
Good.
Thank you, Ellie.
Now the
Thank you, sir.
discussion.
So, okay, so for the discussion, you can use the chat to ask your questions, or if you want to ask the question not using the chat, you can just speak up. You can have your video on or not, but if you are speaking, have your video on. Okay, who's going to start the first one? Question.
Or comments.
Ellie,
Yeah.
Ellie, I have a question. You
Yeah.
mentioned the Marcoses, but you didn't mention the Dutertes. Sarah, who is now the daughter of Rodrigo, the former president, is now the vice president and also the Secretary of Education, and she will be joining Bongbong on Tuesday, coming to the UN, and she's going to be speaking to some conclave on international education at the UN. So can you say something about her role?
Of course, this is like a conversation. There are many conversations going on in the Philippines. Someone said that it was not actually the deal when they first agreed to form this united party. Bongbong in the north, the solid north, and Sara from the south. When you have those two, you can have a very, very strong team that no one in the Philippines can defeat. And basically, the idea that has been circulated was Sara was supposed to be in the Department of National Defense.
Education.
No, Department of Defense. That was the initial agreement.
Initial,
But
yeah.
the initial agreement was Department of National Defense. It's a very critical position.
Yeah.
And then later on was given this position as Secretary of Education and Culture. And of course, with a limited budget compared to the national defense, and even now with a budget that has no accountability. So let's see what she will do in relation to this partnership between BBM and Duterte. People are quite anxious what will be the next moves, and even before the next presidential election, there have been already ideas circulating on possible ways in which Sara Duterte may be sidelined by other people closer to the Marcos group. But let's see the play between Duterte and Marcos camp in the coming months, and what will happen. And well, coming as was already mentioned, that these two will present the Philippines to the wider world with a very much cordial face compared to the Rodrigo Duterte, in order to win the sympathy of the United Nations and other groups. And one of course also was Bongbong was successful in his travels to get some more funding from other governments.
Yeah, I mean, isn't one of her roles just to protect her father from the International Criminal Court and the UN High Commissioner on Human Rights?
Yeah, I think that's from the point of view of the Duterte regime, protect. So there is also another legacy, protection of Duterte, and Marcos Jr. is also refurbishing or putting a nice image, revising, rewriting the history of the Philippines to promote a better legacy of the Marcos regime. So both, it's very interesting, both children, one for Duterte and one for Marcos, dealing with the legacies of their parents, of their fathers, and protecting the interests of their families. So even initial discussion is the idea that Bongbong will present himself as a very constitutional person following constitution, and there is a claim that Philippines has already a strong judiciary. So why should we need international courts to come to visit the Philippines and again investigate what happened during the administration of Duterte, when in fact we have a strong judicial system? We don't need it.
But that's baloney, because every international group that's looked at the Philippine judicial system say it's weak, it's underfunded, it doesn't have even the judicial seats filled. There are many empty seats, and it's often corrupt.
Yeah, but the discussion in the Philippines is not to allow that, because we have already a strong judiciary and other institutions of justice that can deal with those. So I don't know what will happen next. Maybe the Philippine government will concede and allow a visit. I don't know yet.
Eleazar,
Yes, Gary.
I am saddened that the United States is in just as much of a pickle as the Philippines. And a guy like Trump is a mean-spirited, egotistical manipulator. And so far, he is stalling justice. Do you think there's anything that the U.S. can do to help this recollection and moving forward? It seems like we're more interested in bases and geopolitics than we are in human rights in the Philippines.
Well, we are interested in human rights if it is useful for us here in the US. But in that case, especially with the landslide victory of Ferdinand Marcos and his support, I don't imagine the United States will be pushing hard in relation to those issues of martial law and human rights violation. Maybe it will change in the later part of his term, but I don't think that will be the priority of the United States government in the early part of the Marcos administration. Because that would not be, Marcos has this overwhelming support, of course, coming from the people really. Randy David, for example, went to Ilocos Norte to speak, and he spoke at this Don Mariano Marcos University, and people there can't understand why there was this EDSA revolution. What did Marcos do? So in the Philippines, there's still this regionalism. In the Philippines, there is this growing frustration of elitism among Democrat liberals, and that perhaps contributed to the rise of Duterte. And I'm even surprised, and it's hard for me to understand why many of my friends even professors and members of the Board of Trustees of our institutions were really supportive of Duterte and has shifted its support to the Marcos administration. So it appears, according to political analysts, that it is part of the failure of our elitist liberal democracy that has its failure to respond to the urgent needs. And there is what is called the envy, Singapore envy among Filipinos. Look at Singapore and its more authoritarian leader able to respond to the situation. But the Philippines, look at the Philippines. So I think it's the growing frustration and more openness to leaders of the type like Duterte. And they are also tired of always bashing Ferdinand Marcos Jr. People are saying, let's give him a chance. That's actually if yours is never again, theirs is let's give him a chance. Never again versus let's give him a chance to prove himself.
You were stating that many economists think that maybe Marcos may be on the right track. Is he going to stay away from the crony capitalism of his father? I mean, his father ran the economy was run by the inner circle of oligarchs, basically. Is Bongbong going to stay away from that?
Well, maybe in speeches, yes, but I don't think it will happen in real life. He is beholden to these people supporting him, also long connection with his father. So how can you get rid of that or move away from that when you have benefited from that system? So I think it will be same, but people are optimistic that he will do better in relation to the economy.
But will he be skimming money off of projects like his father did? I mean, basically, all international projects went through Malacanang and came out with less dollars than they came in.
Yeah, that's ingrained in the Philippine system. Even if you don't want to do it, somebody will do it for you. If you are in a position of power, somebody will do it for you and will give it to you.
This is it's really hard how we are going to move forward with okay, so now Marcos has the overwhelming support of the people and he is in power. Now, how are we going to make sure that we will always remember what Marcos Sr. or that period of our history be remembered? Because I do not know whether we have enough capability like teachers to be doing to write the right history. So it seems really sad how we are going to proceed. So I just feel so disillusioned, whatever is the term for that. Like there is no way, there's no solution. So anyway, because who are the people who's got the capability? Do we have a capability to go to make sure that our history is going to be right? We cannot just always just be like complaining what is talking about the Marcos period that is not, and so I just have a difficulty trying to figure out what's best to do in this situation. So anyway, I don't know. So we just keep on remembering what lest we forget, and how many people really are remembering what was happening before, because they're just, for one thing, the reason why he won was because we didn't remember, or even if we remember, we have this thing about let's just forget the past, move on. So we're moving on.
I have a question for Paul in this discussion. PSGM has been integral in going to Congress and helping supporting hearings. We've had people from Amnesty International speak. We've had people from all sorts of East Coast religious groups speak, and they could still do that. The question for Paul is, who among Congress people now are our allies, are willing to have a memory, are willing maybe to have hearings and to expose the ongoing crimes?
Paul.
Where is Paul?
Paul. He's muted. You're muted, Paul.
I stopped I turned on my video, not the mute. Oh, okay, but I said Senator Markey just went to the Philippines with a group, and he's pretty strong. Senator Merkley from Oregon, he's pretty strong. Senator Cardin's been very useful. Senator Leahy's been very helpful in the Senate. I mean, there are people that are interested in it, but they got a lot of big things on their plate too. So it's you have to keep the issues alive with them, because they have other things to do. So it's hard to say that we can be real optimistic about things like the Philippine Human Rights Act. It's a useful tool to keep the issue alive, but as far as a actual bill that will pass through both houses, it doesn't look very likely. So there are still people to work with, and still people that will welcome us to their office when we ask. And the group's going to go to the State Department to talk to the Philippine desk and the Philippine and alert them to what's going on in the U.S. with respect to skepticism and opposition to some of the things that Bongbong and Sarah are coming up with.
Ellie, this is Glenn.
Hi, Glenn.
Earlier in your talk, you mentioned in your introduction that it was clear that the victory of BBM was a valid one. Does that mean then that there were no incidents of election fraud that was proven that happened during the election? So the results are reliable? Did you hear anything about that?
There was not an official hearing. I have heard several complaints, but nothing has been presented as a case, because Leni Robredo also conceded very early, and there may be some school teachers said, how can we proclaim when we have not yet finished the counting. So people were
Oh.
saying, but because of the overwhelming majority, even if you factor those kinds of complaints, people say this is overwhelming. Perhaps, I don't know, that's a landslide victory for a presidency in the Philippines. That's a very strong mandate. So even if there were some complaints, they moved forward, and even Robredo conceded as early and did not pursue the case.
So are they going to revive that statue of Marcos in northern Luzon?
There are many things that they are doing. Like, for example, the NAIA. Okay. So basically, this is a dynasty between the Yellow and Marcos. That's why Leni Robredo decided to run as independent with the pink color, because it's really there in the Philippines. Even people I know would say, you can vote for any other candidate besides Yellow. So it's really an arch rival dynasty between the Marcoses and the Aquinos. So you can vote with Pacquiao, you can vote to other candidates, but don't vote for the Yellow. And that's basically what, that's why, that's also part of the decision why Leni Robredo and Pangilinan decided to run as and formed an independent party. And what was your question again?
Were they, remember that the face of Marcos on the side of the mountain that was defaced?
Yeah. So, for example,
Are they fixing that up?
I don't know yet. I have no idea what they're doing. But even that during the time of Corazon Aquino, there was this idea not to deface it, because one way to do it is that it reminds us of the martial law years. But I think it was, I saw it once, it was a little bit already destroyed, but I'm not sure if they were going to rehabilitate that one. But the idea of the Ninoy Aquino International Airport, changing it to MIA, it's actually, the previous one was MIA, Manila International Airport, but it could be Marcos International Airport. So there's a move to change the name. So basically what I'm saying is trying to, this is actually a conflict between two dynasties. So whatever you can do to remove the other. So there's a move to rename NAIA to Marcos International Airport. And you know, politics in the Philippines, if you have the majority, it can be approved. And then once history changes and another group comes, maybe they will also try to do the same. So whoever is in power will be able to do it. The President of the Republic of the Philippines has, it's not really copied our in the US, because our president has basically the power to go after the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court and can declare martial law. So it's not true that the Philippine democracy is copied after the United States of America. And I don't know, even the idea of party list, we formed this party list during the time of Aquino in 1980, after the Constitution party list. But the party list has also been hostage, hijacked by people in power. They are creating, the party list was supposed to address, to become a party of various sectors, labor, but now it's actually used by traditional politicians in the Philippines. And the idea of if you Google and try to operate in the world of social media, I'll say that you will find more revisionist writing of history when you go to TikTok right now, even if you do it, and very slow and not as counter-offensive. So Marcos is very strong in using social media, just like Duterte. But the other group, the progressive ones, are not as effective in using. Marcos is well-funded, well-oiled machinery, working to rebrand the image of the Marcos regime. Very effective. You can just try to surf, and then you will see a lot of TikTok. Even the idea that Marcos ill-gotten wealth, once Marcos will win as president, that it will be used to make the Philippines as an advanced nation compared to others. A lot of people buy the idea. So many analysis are saying that people don't really vote in relation to what, in relation to their heads. People are not rational when it comes to voting. That's part of, I think, the failure of many intellectuals. We thought that because we had the priest, we had the church, we had the educational institutions voting for Leni Robredo, and in fact endorsing. You got even universities endorsing. But how about the common people? People vote not primarily because of some ideas or information, but because of their sentiments. And I think we need to, as progressives, we need to tap that side and not just simply rely on information when we are not able to address the sentiments of the people.
Easier said than done, Ellie. That's very
Pardon?
difficult. That's
Yes,
easier said than done.
Yeah, and that's why in my work in revising curriculum, there are two things that I'm going to address as we talk about education. One is, how do we do education in the age of social media and TikToks? When what you can do in lectures and writings is very small, what you can write in terms of volumes of books can be undone in 5 minutes by TikTok. So how shall we do education in the age of social media and algorithms and TikTok? The other one is, how shall we address the people, addressing what they are, their sentiments and what they're afraid of, rather than simply focus on the head? Because people make decisions, basically, people don't really, only few people really make decisions in relation to their ideas. I think the best, for me, indicator of how people respond is, what do you care the most? What are you worried about? What is, where do you put your hope and values? Rather than information from an analysis from intellectuals. But even intellectuals in the Philippines, professors that I know, voted for Marcos. Even husbands of progressives. Can you imagine? How can you not convince your wife or your husband? Why is it that the wife is so progressive, involved in many rallies, cannot convince her husband, who is an Ilocano? Who is an Ilocano? I'm talking about something real. People that I know.
Yeah.
Okay. I think we are on the 3:15 is when we're supposed this to be over, and we're at that moment. And I just feel anyway, Ellie, I just feel so hopeless.
No.
And so we're just yeah, because we don't, because the Marcoses are now in power, and all the family members are also having some high position in the government. So it's just a hopeless case, but I think we are just going to remember that this thing happened. So that's
And Meg, what we are doing is not going to happen in our lifetime. We are into something greater than ourselves. That includes a span. If this were like doable in 1 year or 2 or 3, that would not be the kind of issue we are dealing with. But we are dealing with social transformation, which is oftentimes beyond our lifetimes. So
yeah.
I think
So-
we are doing a great job for a great for a very immense project that is so much wider than ourselves.
Yeah.
I'm hearing similar sentiment from my NPA friends, including the mother of a scholar who was just murdered last year when she tried to join some of the rebels in Negros. What they're all saying is, it's not a 10-year project. It's like the NPA revolution. It's a many decades project, and you have to work with people and get their minds in the right place.
Yeah, the NPA has only been trying it for 50 years and they haven't. Yeah, anyway.
I don't know if I'm muted, maybe I'm muted, but I just think that we need to focus on what is truth and help people to discern, to be able to discern what truth is. They have to find it out for themselves. It isn't that you can just take what somebody else has told you. You have to be able to analyze. It's not somebody else's analysis in the end. It's your analysis. You have to have the criteria, and we have to educate us so that we are capable of making informed choices.
Yeah, that takes really a lot of energy, Howron.
It does, but it's worth it.
Yes.
And you have a lot of energy, Meg.
Okay, well, anyway, so we officially close, or unless there's some more questions, and then we will break for 5 minutes. We have a meeting, and then go to our PSG meeting. Is that okay? Okay. Thank you very much
Yep.
for coming, guys.
And thank you, Ellie. Thank you very much, Ellie, for that informative
thanks, Ellie.
presentation.
Thank you.
Very
Thank you,
good
Joe.
information.
Thank you, Joe. This is one wife who was able to convince the husband.
Yeah.
Very good.